Hey guys, it's Paul here at Impulsive Culinarian. Welcome to part 3 of the Christmas menu series. And in this video, I want to talk to you about a delicious French-Canadian meat pie, also known as my tourtiere recipe. So French-Canadian meat pie, aka tourtiere, that's a very big tradition in our house ever since I was a little kid. Any good French-Canadian home has their very own personalized recipe for tourtiere, for sure. And that's why last week, in the previous Saturday video, we did pickled beets, because the two guys, they're inseparable at Christmas time. You can hardly have tourtiere without pickled beets and vice versa. And so, here are the ingredients that you're going to need. Alright, so guys, here's the slightly modified version of one of my existing recipes for gluten-free, dairy-free pie crust. We're going to modify it so that it's a savory crust. And what you need is 1/2 of a cup of brown rice flour, 1/2 of a cup of Masa Harina flour, 1/2 of a cup of white rice flour, 1/2 of a cup of Tapioca Flour, 1/2 of a cup of Potato Starch. You're going to need a teaspoon of Guar Gum. All right, 2/3 of a cup of coconut oil. And normally, for the other recipe that you may have already seen on my page, I'm using 2 tablespoons of honey. So we're going to replace that to make it savory with 2 tablespoons of dairy-free margarine, 2 organic eggs, and 2 tablespoons of cold water. All right, so now let's get into the tourtiere ingredients. We're going to need 1 head of garlic cloves. Yes, indeed, we're going to put roasted garlic in this thing. 2 tablespoons of dairy-free margarine, 1 medium yellow onion, which you're going to peel, 2 sticks of celery, 1 large carrot, which you're also going to peel, 1 tablespoon of fresh rosemary once it's finely chopped. So take 2 tablespoons of fresh herbs to result in 1 tablespoon of chopped herbs, 1.5 pounds of ground pork, 1/2 pound of good quality medium ground beef, 1 pound of russet potatoes, which you're going to peel and cut into a large dice, 1/2 pound of sweet potato, which you're also going to peel and cut into a large dice, 3/4 of a cup of some homemade, hopefully, vegetable broth, 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, 1/2 teaspoon of ground cloves, 1 tablespoon of kosher salt, some freshly ground black pepper to taste, and last but not least, 2/3 of a cup of toasted gluten-free breadcrumbs. Wow, that's a lot of ingredients. Yeah, but when you're finished, you're left with one heck of a great meat pie. Let's get cooking. Christmas time and tourtiere. To me, they are synonymous. I can't have Christmas without a good tourtiere recipe, okay? So admittedly, this has to start with some kind of a pie shell. Now, I've already got a recipe for gluten-free, dairy-free pie crust, which I encourage you to check out. Now, the thing about that recipe is that it's a sweet pie crust for like an apple pie because of the 2 tablespoons of honey that are in the ingredient list. So what we're going to do is do the exact same recipe, same process, but we're going to replace the honey with 2 tablespoons of dairy-free margarine, okay? So if you want to see in much more detail, go check out that recipe. Otherwise, I'm going to zip through that right now and do the recipe twice so I can have 1 shell for the bottom and 1 shell for the top. Go! All right, so there's my 2 batches of gluten-free, dairy-free pie crust with the honey being replaced with 2 tablespoons of dairy-free margarine instead to give that a savory flavor. All right, so the fast-forward version of my 2-batch pie shell and pie topping recipe. All right, now that these are done, I'm going to put them in the refrigerator while we make some tourtiere. Okay, guys, so now we're in the business of making the filling for this tourtiere, and it all starts with this magic ingredient right here, an entire head of garlic cloves. First, preheat your oven to 400 degrees. All right, so while your oven is heating up, get yourself a small baking dish. I'm using an 8-inch cake pan. Any baking dish will do. It doesn't really matter. First thing you want to do is line that with a large piece of tin foil, one that's big enough to be able to fold over once your head of garlic is in there. And you know how much I hate when tin foil touches my food. So I am going to actually wrap the head of garlic inside a small square of parchment paper, put that in the tin foil, and fold it over. I know. Obsessions. So when you want to trim this, okay, to sit properly, you may have to shave the bottom a little bit with a sharp knife, but more importantly is you want to cut the very tops of each of those cloves right across the top so that you can expose each one and drizzle some oil on top. Cut away. Beautiful. Now I can see each and every one of those cloves of garlic, and that's great. I trimmed off the little shavings in the bottom so it'll sit flat in my baking dish. Get a little tiny bit of olive oil. Okay, so using a barbecue brush or even the olive oil bottle itself, whatever you prefer, drizzle a generous amount of olive oil on top of those garlic cloves. All right, so once that head of garlic is nicely saturated in olive oil, fold up the tin foil and seal the pan. There we go, garlic head all wrapped up. So once your oven gets to 400 degrees, get this in the center rack and bake it for 1 hour. All right, so now that the garlic's in the oven, let's get the potatoes started. Get a big pot. All right, so into the pot go around 8 cups of warm water. Okay, so once your water's in the potato pot, you want to heavily salt it. I would go with 2 generous tablespoons of salt. Let's say 2, maybe 3. Next, you want to measure out, yes indeed, measure out 1 pound of russet potatoes. Okay, so you can see that 1 pound, around 2.5 medium-sized russet potatoes, okay? Do the same for a ½ a pound of sweet potato. Do I guess lucky the first shot? Let's find out. Not even close, 5 ounces. It's okay, it's all right. 8 ounces, second try lucky. So just for your own information, that's what a ½ of a pound of sweet potato looks like, okay? A good 2 inches, I think, of thickness on a large sweet potato. Plus these 2.5 russets is my 1 pound of white potatoes. So I'm gonna peel those, chop them into big sized chunks, and get them into the water while it's heating up. All right, so make sure your potato water is on high heat and let it come to a boil. Get those potatoes before it's boiled. You kind of want to gently warm everything up at the same time. And as soon as it does come to a boil, you want to bring it down to medium and keep it on a gentle simmer, a gentle boil for around 15 minutes so that they're super tender. If you have older potatoes, it happens sometimes, you may need to go for 20 minutes to get them really soft. You want them to be nice and mushy. All right, so next you want to choose another big pan, which you're going to use to mix up all of the meat mixture. Even those potatoes are going to go into that pan as well. So you have a couple of options available to you. You can use a large Dutch oven, something that works well on a stove top, or you can just basically get yourself a big stock pot, okay? I'm using this because I know it's a lot of meat, all right? And the Dutch oven that I've got, it's sort of a rounded bottom. It really gets to the top. So I'm gonna use this pot, and you need it to have a cover because you do want to simmer this mixture once it's done browning, okay? So something that's large with a cover on the stovetop. Okay, so the first thing to go into our meat pot, if you will, is a mirepoix, all right? That's onion, celery, and carrots. I've already got sort of like a small dice yellow onion from the other night. I'm gonna use this as 1/3 of the ingredients. I'm gonna get 2 sticks of celery. I'm gonna chop them up into big chunks, and either 1 large carrot or 2 medium-sized carrots, also peeled and trimmed off. You don't have to chop these finely because we're gonna use a food processor. The reason for that is I want everything in a very, very fine dice. I want it to be as minced as possible so that they're not really perceptible inside the meat pie. So go ahead and cut them into large chunks and get everything into the food processor. Okay, so pulse this mixture really well so that everything is reduced down to the tiniest mince that you can get. So when you're most of the way done, scrape down the sides. Make sure that everything is down to the same small mince. So there's the texture you're looking for, guys. This consistency is perfect. Once it's sauteed and it's sweated down a little tiny bit, plus mixed up with a couple of pounds of ground meat, you're barely going to notice it, but you are going to notice the incredible addition of flavor. While I was making my mirepoix blend, my potatoes have come to a boil. So I'm going to bring that down to medium and set a 15-minute timer so I can check them for doneness. All right, so let's get this large mixing pot up to medium-low heat. Now into that pot, you want to put 2 tablespoons of Dairy Free Margarine, but no more. If you're generous on the margarine, that's going to add liquid to the meat mixture later on. So hold off on the extra dose of margarine, get 2 tablespoons in the pot. Okay, next, get your vegetables into the margarine. Okay, so stir the mirepoix occasionally and let it saute for around 15 to 20 minutes until everything gets nice and soft. Okay, so while all this is cooking, guys, get out your fresh rosemary, strip it off, and chop it up into nice little fine pieces. So guys, if you're like me and you make and freeze your vegetable broth in advance, now you have a little lull in the schedule. So warm that up and get it ready for when you need it later on. All right, so my potatoes have been boiling for 15 minutes. I'm gonna take a sharp knife and just check to see if they're actually cooked. All right, so those are pretty much cooked all the way, guys. I'm gonna get a colander out and drain my potatoes. Okay, so I'm gonna let the potatoes cool for a second because right now my mirepoix has also been cooking for around 15 minutes. So it's time to add my chopped up rosemary. I just wanna add that to the last minute of cooking just to release the oils and give it some flavor. All right, so that mirepoix is looking great, not to mention it smells fantastic. So I got my chopped rosemary in there, okay? Just around 1 minute of that, and then you're on to the next step. All right, so now that my mirepoix and chopped rosemary have been cooking for a minute or so, now it's time to add the meat. All right, so once you've added your beef and your pork into the pot, raise the heat to medium so that you can begin the process of browning it. All right, so once your meat has thoroughly browned, temporarily remove it from the heat onto a heat-safe platter. So guys, depending on the fat content of the meat that you bought from your store, okay, you may notice that there is either a lot or very little of this grease sort of left after the cooking process. If you find that there's a lot, okay, then it's all right to take some of that out and dispose of it safely or even drain it off, all right, because it all depends. It's different. Every time that you buy meat, some has more, some has less fat, okay? So you judge accordingly. I find that this is a little bit much, so I'm going to drain that off because I don't want to add all that liquid, and it's not very healthy either. So I'm going to dispose of it safely and leave myself with a slightly drier meat mixture. All right, so I've discarded some of the excess fat from my meat mixture, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to return the potatoes back into their original pot, add my vegetable broth, and mash them up really good. In goes the broth. Potato mash. Good workout. Okay, that's a mashed, regular, and sweet potato. Let's have a look. So you do not want to leave any lumps behind, guys, and regardless of your personal preference as mashed potatoes as a side dish, for this tourtiere, you want it to be nice and smooth. Okay, add this lovely mashed potato mixture into the meat mixture. Okay, so this spice mixture, right? Cloves, cinnamon, and nutmeg. Very powerful stuff. So don't freehand, guys. Measure off your half teaspoon of each. Trust me, you don't want to go in excess. Whew, that's a spice hit. Holiday spices right there, okay? So get this very powerful 1.5 teaspoons total of spices into the meat mixture. All right, stir all of that mixture together until it's thoroughly combined. So now that you've got your meat and your potatoes all back together into one mixture, get that pot back onto the stovetop over low heat. Now, if you previously had it at medium-high for that other process, make sure that your burner is down to low. There's potatoes in the mix now, so if you put it on a hot burner, it's gonna burn. So once you're sure your burner is on low, get the pot back on uncovered and let it simmer for half an hour. Okay, so at some point during the simmering of your meat, your garlic should be done. So get it out of the oven and then carefully transfer all of those beautiful roasted garlic cloves into a small bowl in preparation for the last step. Look at those roasted lovelies. Oh, fantastic. The smell is unbeatable, unbeatable. All right, so now's a good time to prepare your 2/3 of a cup of gluten-free breadcrumbs. So if you're like me and you make your own bread, this is normal size gluten-free bread. Yeah, just in case you want to know. All right, so get yourself 2 good slices of this, pop it in the toaster, and that's going to be perfect to add into your food processor. If you're using those tiny little pieces of udi bread, right, or 1/3 of the size of that, maybe 4 or 5 slices will do the trick, okay? You want 2/3 of a cup of final product. All right, so get your 2 big slices of gluten-free bread out of the toaster into the food processor. Now, before adding the roasted garlic into this food processor, I want to give this toast a blitz so that I can get it down to breadcrumb size. All right, so now that I've reduced the toast down to big chunky breadcrumbs, I'm going to add in my roasted garlic cloves and really blitz the heck out of it. Well, there's a delicious smell right there. Garlicky breadcrumbs, roasted garlic breadcrumbs. Yeah, that's awesome. Get that into a small bowl. Okay, so the meat mixture and potatoes have been simmering on low heat for half an hour. That's perfect. Yeah, you want to take that off the heat onto a heat-safe platter, let it cool for around 15 minutes. So it's taken a little bit of work to get here, guys, but the meat and potato mixture is finally almost cooled down to where I need it to be. The breadcrumb and roasted garlic mixture is waiting to be folded in. We're going to get a large mixing bowl and combine all that together. Okay, so 10-15 minutes after you've taken that meat and potatoes mixture off the stove, it's probably just cool enough to safely transfer into a large mixing bowl. All right, so now you've got your meat mixture safely into a cool bowl that you can handle and put into your fridge, but not until you've added a couple of things. Take your breadcrumb and roasted garlic mixture, get that into the meat. Next, you want to add a tablespoon of kosher salt. Some freshly ground black pepper to taste. Mix it until everything is thoroughly combined. All right, so if you've got a cover for your bowl, perfect, all right, do so. Or if you don't, take a piece of cling film, all right, big enough to just cover the top of this meat mixture. Then you want to get this bowl into the fridge for at least an hour. If not, overnight would be even better, but you gotta let it cool, so get it in the fridge. Okay, so around an hour has gone by that my meat mixture is in the fridge cooling off, and so just before I take that out, I want to preheat my oven to 375. Okay, so while your oven is preheating, you want to take your top shell out of the fridge to let it warm up a little bit. That's the pastry that's going to go on top of your tourtiere. If it's been in the fridge for an hour or overnight, depending on how long you waited, it's probably really hard. So you want to let it warm up to almost room temperature. That way it's going to be more pliable and a lot easier to sort of, manipulate when you try and put it on top of your tourtiere. Okay, 1 hour has elapsed. Get your pie shell out of the fridge and your cooled meat mixture. Okay, so depending on how long you've let your tourtiere mixture cool, it may be a little bit loose, it may be very solid. So get a sturdy spoon and mix it up just to loosen up a little bit. Now you can transfer that into your refrigerated pie shell. Oh, that smells fantastic. Okay, so using that same spoon or a spatula of some sort of smooth that out and give that tourtiere a nice dome shape. Now, there's a lovely looking tourtiere. All right, no cover yet, but I wanted to take a second to show you guys that once you get all of that beautiful meat in and you've got a nice little dome shape, all right, you want to leave the edge of this pie shell sort of clear and available, because you're going to take a little bit of water, all right, and just with your finger sort of dab your water around the edge of that pie shell, so that when you take the top part of that pastry and you put it on, you want to make sure that it creates a sort of a seal here. You don't want any of that juice or that meat to get out. All right, so take a little dab of water and go all the way around the edge. Now that you've taken out the top pie shell, all right, you let it warm up a little bit, it should be slightly pliable so that it doesn't crack. But the hard part is to flip it gently on top without breaking it. That's the challenge. Cross your fingers, guys. Whew. I would say 99% mission success. Phew. All right, so as you can see, I mostly succeeded in getting that pie shell on top. I just got a little bit of destruction on the side here, but that's easy enough to patch up. And one tiny little tear here, which I was able to fix on the fly. So for the most part, my tourtiere is covered. I'm just going to clean it up a bit and get it ready for the oven. So if you've stuck to the plan, guys, you should have a tiny little bit of pastry dough left over. That's great if you like to decorate. You can make little designs and all that kind of stuff, okay? Me personally, I'm a little bit of a simpleton when it comes to that. I am, however, going to take a fork and I'm going to push down the edge of that pie crust just to make sure that I've sealed the edges all around. Okay, so let your arts and crafts skills kick in, guys. Get yourself a long strip of tin foil, cut it in half, do whatever it takes, and retrofit something that you're going to be able to easily just sort of fit on top. Doesn't have to be pretty, but that just basically has to reflect the heat from the edges of your pie crust. Leave it aside, get the pie in the oven, center rack for 30 minutes. Okay, so 30 minutes has elapsed. This pie's been in the oven for half the time that it's supposed to cook. So you start checking every 5 minutes or so just to make sure that the edges aren't burning. I can tell you right now, The edges of this pie crust are definitely not even golden brown. So it depends on a couple of factors. How long you've refrigerated your pie crust, how long you've cooled the pie. So many things can change the timing of this whole process. So if it doesn't need this makeshift cover, don't bother. But check it every 5 or 10 minutes to make sure that it doesn't burn. So what I noticed after 1 hour is that the edges are starting to brown. And the center is still in need of a little bit of cooking. So I'm going to put on my prefab tint after 1 hour of cooking, and I'm going to let it go for another 15 minutes. All right, so 1 hour and 15 minutes has expired. Let's get that pie out of the oven. All right, there you go, guys. After 1 hour and 15 minutes, I've got that beautiful browning on the edge of the crust, and this pie is done. But in order to serve this up, you want to make sure to let it cool for at least 20 to 30 minutes. So there you go, guys, a beautiful gluten-free, dairy-free pie that you can be proud to serve up at your French-Canadian Christmas. So guys, thanks for watching part 3 in the Christmas menu series. I can't wait to deliver the dessert that's coming in part 4. And if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, guys, and subscribe to the channel. One last video before the big weekend. My name is Paul from Impulsive Culinarian. Don't forget to join me on Wednesday when I do my Wines Day weekly update. Open up a brand new vintage of beautiful red wine. I got so many to choose from, I don't even know where to begin. I look forward to seeing the next video, guys. Cheers.